Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you. I want to begin, of course, by acknowledging that we are gathered here today on the traditional territories of Treaty 6. And I'd like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share such a deep connection with this land. And thank you so much, Jason, for that lovely introduction. It really is such a pleasure for me to be able to be here today and to address your convention and to give you all a very big and very warm welcome to the lovely city of Edmonton. Okay, I'll grant you, it could be warmer. But it isn't November in Edmonton if it is without a fresh pile of snow. And I actually find that the first big snowfall is really kind of a creative test of my attention span, because I suddenly have to try and remember where all the potholes are. And the fact is with all the snow and all the potholes, I've actually hit so many of them with my car that I've started thinking that I might need to get a new vehicle. So I went on to Kijiji, and you'll never believe it. I found a used Dodge Ram, navy blue. Turns out I knew the owner. We used to work in the same building together. And it was such a great deal. It was amazing. Like, there was practically 0 miles on that puppy. You would never believe it. Anyhow, welcome to everyone, and thank you all for having me here today. And I also want to take a moment to begin by thanking your president, Paul McLaughlin. He's been a very strong advocate on all the many issues that I know matter to all of you. Just recently, me and members of my team, we were pleased to be able to meet with Paul and with Jason and with other members of the RMA board, and we had a really good discussion. And we talked about ways to support your communities, to create jobs, to get projects built, and to improve important services like healthcare and education. And we also talked, actually, about the rising cost of living. Fact is, today we are in a period of record inflation, one not seen in 40 years. Albertans are working harder and longer to build our economy. And they're finding they end up with less money in their pocket. They're racking up debt, they're postponing family vacations, and in many cases, they're worried about how many corners they're going to have to cut the next time they go grocery shopping. And I will submit to you today that our UCP government has taken that bad situation and made it worse. Seriously, folks, the list of their cuts and their downloads onto families, if I were to roll it out, it would probably be taller than me. And you have my commitment that those choices, those many choices that have come at the expense of Albertans' pocketbooks, will be reversed. And this matters. This matters to you folks, because what happens when people feel the squeeze on their finances in your communities? Well, they end up spending less in the economy, and they take on more stress, and they take on more hardship. And quite frankly, as municipal leaders, you too have felt this stress in your own budgets, as the UCP has been cutting back on so many different forms of municipal funding. And on top of that, you're currently shouldering a $250 million loss as some oil and gas companies continue to ignore their back taxes. We need to make some very serious reforms at the Alberta Energy Regulator. We need to get to the bottom of this problem. And our government, should we get to form government, will get this problem fixed, and that is a promise that you can take to the bank. Now, honestly, you know, there have been so many short-sighted decisions that I don't agree with when it comes to your funding. I won't repeat them all, but I do believe it is time to start taking the long-term approach. And that approach is simple. Respect you as the local leaders you are, and work together to build this province without requiring any of you to register as a lobbyist in the process. And that is why, that should I and my team have the privilege of forming your next government, I have committed to entering into a new funding agreement with legislation that we are calling the Partners in Prosperity Act. We'll sit down with you and we will work out an equitable funding agreement. And instead of repeated unexpected cuts to municipal programs, we will ensure that you have stable and predictable funding. Because when Alberta is thriving, you should be thriving too, and you should see that reflected in your funding. And when we need to hunker down, and as you may know, I've seen those times as well, we have to do that together as well. But overall, our agreement needs to rest on a framework that gives you stability, that gives you predictability, so that you can do your work and plan for the future in your communities. The fact is that we really desperately need to bring stability back to this province in a whole lot of areas, not the least of which is our healthcare system. I believe there is no greater challenge facing rural Alberta communities right now than the chaos that we see in rural healthcare. And if we don't fix this, and I mean right away, I fear that this is going to threaten the overall viability of rural communities. People will leave. Communities will suffer. Now, we all know that the pandemic exposed very serious, long-standing gaps in the system. No question about that. But I would also argue that it was the mismanagement of the current government that is making matters worse. Today, we have a staffing crisis in every corner of this province. We should not try to deny it. And that staffing crisis is forcing families in the north to visit emergency rooms since there are no doctors accepting new patients in, say, Peace River, for example. It's forcing expectant families in Lac La Biche to travel 2 hours down the highway so they give birth in Edmonton. Those are precious minutes that can affect the health of a mother and a baby in an emergency situation. Now, the Hardisty Healthcare Centre closed in April 2020. 1/3 of Beaver Lodge's acute care space has not been usable in 14 months. In St. Paul, the operating room hasn't been open in a full year. And the list goes on and on and on. Stettler, Consort, Sylvan Lake, Boyle, Elk Point, Fairview, Westlock have all had scheduled emergency room closures in the last 6 months due to a lack of staff. The shortage is so severe that some clinics and some hospitals may never reopen. Doctors and frontline workers are retiring and burning out, and frankly, some are just so sick of the broken relationship with this government that they would rather work someplace else. Like, for instance, BC, where the government is posting a giant help wanted great working conditions sign. Or Ontario, where Ottawa health officials are literally placing ads online here promising stable working conditions there. Meanwhile, the only doctor invited back to Alberta under Premier Smith so far is, get this, Donald Trump's medical advisor, a man who called the lifelong COVID-19 vaccine, the life-saving COVID-19 vaccine a bioweapon. Literally called it a bioweapon. Seriously, the conspiracies in a Tom Clancy novel are more coherent than this guy. But somehow he's the one who gets a personal invite to chat about healthcare with the Premier. What kind of message do you think that is sending to our overworked frontline healthcare professionals? And is it one that makes them more likely to stay or to come here to Alberta? I think not. Folks, this simply can't go on. We need to act now before these problems get worse. So what we need is careful, thoughtful reform that addresses the real issues. We need to trust science. We need to focus on real solutions. And then we need to restore respect to frontline healthcare workers who have done so much in unimaginable and unprecedented circumstances. And then we need to add more people to those front lines. And I'm here to commit to you today that should we be elected to serve Albertans this spring, an Alberta NDP government will launch the largest healthcare recruitment strategy Alberta has ever seen. In the coming weeks, we will release more details of a broad plan that works to end the chaos and provide care to your communities. It includes ideas to support family doctors and medical professionals as they move here, to provide much-needed primary care and family medicine, It includes new initiatives and targets for training more healthcare professionals within our province, as well as working deliberately to remove the barriers that are keeping international grads from practicing here. And it will set out a new vision to make the best use of the health professionals already trained, already living here in Alberta. Doctors, of course, but also nurse practitioners, community paramedics, dietitians, home care workers, and mental health counselors, to name a few. But on that last note, I do want to say, I was quite moved when we met with the RMA board as they spoke about some of the challenges that are being faced in rural communities around mental health. It was very impressive. We know the challenges in the last few years have increased stress and anxiety on all Albertans. It's absolutely true, but we also know that at the same time in rural Alberta, the access to mental health counselling is probably nowhere close to where it should be. And that's why we want to work with you folks to address this mental health crisis. And it starts with our commitment, one that we made over a year ago, to provide every Albertan with 5 mental health counselling sessions for free each and every year. But at the same time, we need to be talking to you about how to make that plan work best for you in your communities. Because to me, it won't work if someone has to drive 200 kilometers to get the counseling that they need. So we'll stop that from happening. Now, another area that we need to look at when it comes to health relates a little bit to the seniors who are living in rural Alberta, because we know that they are putting a lot of pressure on our healthcare system as well. We also heard about that issue very loud and clear in the room today. We need to remove barriers, and that's why we'll restore the plan that our government had in place prior to 2019 to build more seniors housing. And we will put the 50,000 Albertans who were kicked off of the seniors drug plan back on that drug plan. And we will re-index the seniors benefit so seniors who are living on fixed incomes do not find themselves falling farther and farther behind in the middle of the worst inflationary crisis in generations. And overall, this will help them live more secure and therefore more healthy lives. On all these issues, we will listen. We know that it can't be one size fits all, and we know we need you at the table. Rural leaders like you folks have the best insights into the needs of your constituents. And that's true for healthcare, and you know what else? It's also true when it comes to building a resilient, job-focused economy. We need an economy that attracts investment, that makes bold progress in emerging sectors, and ensures that hardworking Albertans are earning good wages. So we've started the building blocks of our economic plan through our Alberta's Future project, which you can read in its entirety at albertasfuture.ca. I may have mentioned that before to some of you in this room. But in there, we talk about some of our ideas. We're going to grow opportunities in renewable energy, in hydrogen development, in geothermal energy, in high-tech and innovation, value-added petrochemicals, and agri-food development, which is full of so much potential for our producers. We'll also be doing critical work on how to properly manage the windfall surplus that our province has generated as a result of supercharged oil and gas prices. Now, we all know we have a $13 billion surplus this year that's driven by those high royalties. And it's likely that these royalties will stay high for at least a couple more years. Now, you know the old saying, we all do. Please, God, give me one more oil boom and I promise not to piss it all away, right? We all know that bumper sticker. But beyond painting quite a vivid picture, that bumper sticker is a pretty fair warning not to repeat past mistakes. So that's why I recently asked former ATB Chief Economist Todd Hirsch to work with our finance critic to provide advice on how best to take advantage of this generational opportunity. Todd's going to be talking to experts and harnessing their collective wisdom to tell us how to get the best possible return on investment on these dollars. We need to be thoughtful, we need to be strategic. And we need to make sure that these dollars are put to use in a way that sets us up best for the future. And that's why we're so pleased that such a trusted voice on the economy, like Todd's, is prepared to work with us and to do this work for us. And through it, I'm confident that we will receive and then be able to implement the best plan possible. Now, another thing that we will be doing and focusing on is standing up for Alberta. When it comes to the federal government, we will be sophisticated advocates and negotiators that the province of Alberta needs in order to get actual things done. Now, I've heard from many of you that there's been a lot of cash left on the table in Ottawa. Money that you could have used to get projects moving or even leverage other private investment. That needs to stop. My plan is to just go out and get that money, every single dollar. Now, notwithstanding some sort of interesting stories out there, the fact is I kind of have a bit of a history of having had a few big fights with Ottawa. I even went toe-to-toe with NDP governments in other provinces. And while doing that, I walked into rooms that were, frankly, not that happy with me for talking to them about the truth around our oil and gas. Good truths. And I didn't do this for political gain, but I did it because it was in the best interests of all Albertans. The other thing, though, is that I never did that work alone. Folks like you were always there, too. And with you, I knew that we had the backing of our entire province, and together we were successful at building strategic support for Canada's oil and gas sector from coast to coast to coast. And that is why, next year, Alberta is going to turn on the first new oil pipeline to Tidewater in 50 years. And my friends, those negotiations with Ottawa sometimes got a little hot. Words were exchanged, not all of them repeatable at a microphone. But we got more done twisting arms on those phone calls and in those meetings than would ever have been accomplished by angry tweeting or passing fake or illegal legislation. Now, you all know what I'm talking about, the so-called Sovereignty Act. I want to say very clearly, TMX would never have been built under the methods and the ideas being put forward by the current Premier. In fact, many are warning that it will cause economic chaos and drive investment away from our province. Numerous economists and business leaders have spoken out against the Sovereignty Act proposal, as have many of those in the current UCP cabinet. Brian Jean said he was worried for our energy and tech industries. Yep, me too. Travis Taves said business would abandon Alberta in favor of other jurisdictions. Sonia Savage said international investors have already started expressing concerns about the value of their assets here in Alberta. So, folks, I have no idea what will end up being debated in the legislature in a month, but I do know this. It won't fix the serious problems that need fixing because it is not a serious solution to those problems. Alberta must be recognized as the leader we have been and the leader that we are within Confederation. My position is that what you need to do is work with the federal government when it makes sense and fight strategically and thoughtfully for Alberta's interests when it doesn't. And that is what a stable, competent government standing up for its province looks like to me. Because all this confusion and all this investment uncertainty and fighting for the sake of fighting does, in the meantime, is that it takes attention away from the priorities that really matter. So I promise you today that I'll bring the same energy that I and everybody else in my government brought to getting TMX over the line to dealing with Ottawa on other issues that matter to rural Albertans. For instance, here's an example. I heard you guys talked a little bit about this morning. We know how important broadband is to your community's economies. We've talked about that a lot. Indeed, as you know, last year we shared with you folks our plan on getting rural broadband happening. However, as some of you may have heard, very recently we've seen some new obstacles potentially emerge. And as some of you may know, a couple weeks ago, the federal government put new conditions on the proposed Rogers-Shaw merger. Now, it was done in an effort to limit monopolization in the telecom industry. But what they did was they are mandating that part of Shaw be sold to another company, Videotron. But an unintended consequence of this decision may be that the radio frequency access required for Alberta's rural broadband development will actually be held by a Quebec company, a company that may not be all that interested in using that radio frequency access as quickly or as fully as we need. And the result could well delay rural broadband growth, full stop. So yesterday, I wrote to the federal minister requesting that conditions on the merger be amended to include a guarantee that these frequencies or spectrums, as they say in the biz, must be allocated on a very specific basis. And in particular, we said they need to either use it to help Albertans or they lose it. That kind of criteria, that kind of requirement will ensure that our work on rural broadband can continue deliberately, aggressively, and without delay. And this is vital to rural connectivity in Alberta, and it is vital to our economic future. We're also, as an addition, we're also calling on them to ensure that the headquarters stay here in Alberta and that cell phone costs go down, not up. All of this comes together to keep good jobs here and to keep our bills affordable at a time when all of us are looking for a whole bunch of different ways to keep a whole bunch of different things affordable. Speaking of affordability, let me say this for the record. No credible plan to combat rural crime includes increasing costs and developing an expensive plan to blow up the RCMP. Policing should be about community safety. But let's remember why this is truly being done. It's not about rural crime. Again, it's all about flipping the bird at Ottawa. It's about them, not you. Now, I would hazard a guess that the Prime Minister probably isn't losing sleep over this plan. But you know who is? Folks like you, municipal leaders, taxpayers, landowners, citizens, not to mention the thousands of frontline RCMP officers who go to work in our communities each and every day. They're the ones who are up at night. And they're not thinking about how to leave the RCMP for some kind of provincial police force. Oh, no, no. What they're doing is they're thinking about leaving Alberta altogether and leaving our communities with thousands of vacancies on local police forces. So I say this, how about instead we just do this? We keep the RCMP. And instead, how about we come together at all levels of government to take effective action to combat rural crime? So, my friends, I think I've probably covered a lot, and I'm looking back at the back of the room, and you might see one or two of my staff starting to wave their hands a little bit frantically, telling me that I'm way over time. So I'm going to wrap it up. I know I've set out a few big goals, but the fact is we also face big challenges. And we need big and bold ideas, and we need a government that is capable of delivering on them, also one that understands the importance of our partnerships in order to do that. One that invests in services that matter to all of us, one that saves for the future, one that recognizes rural Alberta as the economic driver that it is, and a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. I know I live in Edmonton, but I'm still a Fairview girl at heart. I know the people of rural Alberta to be hardworking, to be compassionate, to be honest, families who choose to live out in the country and do their share to build their communities. I believe that we really are truly at our best when we come together as neighbors with a helping hand and open hearts. And that is what I know that all of us will do as we go forward over the next months and years. So thank you all very much. Thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. And I do hope that you all have a great rest of your convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.